select some a case history that's associated with their work to try to figure out, okay, which of these particular techniques would be useful or was used in that particular circumstance, and to kind of show what the one of the apps, how you could use that to kind of help solve that. So the scope is completely wide open. I mean, from point of view, most of geological engineers, some problem that is associated with either electrical conductivity or seismic refraction or anything like that. Just find something that kind of resonates with you, and then kind of try to focus everything on like a 7-step performance and show the applicability of how an app would ask some questions. It might be that you don't actually get through to a successful application of the geophysics in that particular problem, but at least you've opened up the potential scope for doing that. So we're going to talk more about that later, but I just want to raise this issue now so you start to think about all of these different geophysical techniques, and is there one particular technique that ties into a problem that you're really interested in, and then try to see, okay, how you'd actually make use of it, and then to use the app to do that. So what we'll do, we'll have each person do that individually. They'll hand in something. So the idea is that you just put everything onto a few PowerPoint slides, step 1, step 2, step 3, and then that gets handed into us. And then each group can assess, we've got 5 people generally in a group. So you could look at the 5 individual case histories that were shown and then say, oh yeah, that kind of like that one. Maybe that's going to be our strongest case. And then there'll be one session in which you can just kind of work together to try to see if you can't improve that. And then that would be handed in as your team case history. And then I'm hoping that we'll have enough opportunity, and if we're very efficient about it, we can, so that each team could present, here's my case history. And that would be kind of a nice finale. So what that would do is allow all of the stuff that we've been doing throughout the course to be kind of put within a context that maybe resonates with you, and then take it. Okay, so that's the goal. So think about things that are of interest at this point. And so, okay. Yeah. I'm sorry?
When the individual part of that assignment is due?
We kind of had a date on the schedule. I'll take a look at the schedule. So remember I wrote this line, and I have frequency here. And then we had really high frequencies like 10 to the 7 hertz, right? So this was the GPR. And then we had really low frequencies, like frequency is equal to 0, so that's the DC. I've got all this stuff in the middle. So the question is, what's actually happening? Up at this range here, electromagnetic energy is propagating as a wave. In this regime down here, it's purely geometric. Sagi mentioned that, oh yeah, there's kind of interesting stuff that's going on here. Things are diffusing into the earth, and could get diffusion and attenuation, and had skin depth associated with things, and then there was a wave propagation. What I want to do now is to look at the last and potentially one of the most valuable techniques in geophysics, and will become even more so as time goes on, and that is electromagnetic methods. I first of all want to kind of motivate you by showing you some really kind of generic, interesting example. So remember in the lab, you had this cylinder here, right? And you thought, well, how do I find that? Well, I could put in a current in here. Here's my A electrode. Here's my B. And if that, let's suppose that was a conductor, you can see how the currents kind of get sucked in there. And that gave me a low apparent resistance. So, okay, there's something that's got a smaller resistivity here. Maybe I can find it. What happens if I take that same experiment, exactly the same, but I put on there a little layer? The idea is I'm going to put, so here's my cylinder, right? So I see that. Here's my A electrode, and here's my B electrode. And if that's just buried in a nice space, then I get current kind of comes in, goes like this, gets kind of sucked in, and I get these charges that are built up, I get these potentials here, I'm good to go. What happens if I take this same example and I put in a little layer in here that is resistive? So I'm going to make this layer here really resistant. I don't know.
Would it not go through all the way to the cylinder?
Who would agree with that?
Or we get less going through the cylinder. I think it won't go deep enough because of that, because of the layer.
This is exactly right. So remember, I don't go through, if I have a resistor here, but if this is, like, imagine it's really, really resistive, then this is like a shield. It's like your aquatard, okay? Ain't nothing going through there. So all the current might go like that. So this is what happens. So now I'm trying to find this thing, but there's a little layer here, and believe me, that layer could be very thin. It could be 10 centimeters thick, and if it's really resistive, that's exactly what's going to happen. So you get current that just gets effectively channeled in this top layer, and the result of that is that I don't see anything. I cannot see that. So that's a real problem, right? We've got something there. We know that the DC resistivity could potentially work, but if I put on a real resistive layer in here, I'm moved. And what about if I had a conducting layer?
That should be okay. It shouldn't affect anything. Good.
Okay. So if I have a conducting layer, now actually all the currents kind of go through and they hit this conductor, and everything just goes through the conductor and then up. So the background host material here play a really, really big role. And if I've got a really resistive layer or a really conductive layer, the DC resistivity may not work. So that's something to be kept in mind. What we're now going to do, I'm going to show you how, for this case here that we just talked about, when we had a resistive layer, you could see this. I'm going to show you a method in electromagnetics that actually can see through to this and see this. How cool is that, right? We've got one technique that is completely blind to this, and we do something that's a little bit different, and we're actually going to see this with complete clarity. So what we're going to do is something called electromagnetic surveys. I'm going to take you through the same basic procedures as we do. But I wanted to kind of step through the fundamental aspects here to kind of show what the technique is here. What you're seeing up here is actually a helicopter, and it's towing what's called a bird. And in that bird, there is a transmitter, and there's also a receiver. And this transmitter is putting out a time-varying magnetic field, which is going to induce currents into conductors, and those currents are going to give rise to magnetic fields that are going to be at this receiver. So that is basically the idea of what it is that we're going to look at. Everything is governed by Maxwell's equations, which Sagi talked to you about. The physical properties that are potentially of interest in Maxwell's equation are electrical conductivity, or its reciprocal resistivity. The magnetic permeability, that's what we saw, magnetic susceptibility, and the dielectric constant. So those are three things that potentially enter in, and depending on where you are in this spectrum, one or the other might be more dominant. We're going to concentrate on electrical conductivity, which is just the same as we've been talking about with DC resistivity. So we've shown you this diagram before, so I don't need to go through it. So resistivity on the top axis, the conductivity reciprocal on one. The applications, and this is why electromagnetics is really exciting, is that it just has applications to all kinds of problems. In mineral exploration, it's huge. So you're trying to find either the geologic structure of the background, or you're trying to find the mineral deposit itself. And so there's various types of electromagnetic experiments. Contaminants. This is a big deal these days, as we're continuing to dump in stuff. We're having to contend with stuff that was dumped in ages ago. A lot of this stuff has got a lot of total dissolved solids. So there's a lot of kind of conductivity material in there. And we need to find them. This stuff is dripped down through the earth, and it's causing problems getting into our water supply. Where the heck is this stuff, and how do we do it? Water issues are huge. Of all of the problems that and people talk about climate change and this and that, climate change is affecting us hugely, but the inertia that's involved in that is long scale. It's tens of years, 20 years, right? So it's sometimes kind of hard for the public to kind of get their mind torqued around about just how serious a problem it is. But the one issue that we have in this world that is going to be front and center at an ever-increasing rate is water. Having access to water, having access to clean water, knowing what you have, knowing how you can take water in times of huge rainfalls and floods, how you can actually store it, where you can store it, how to pull it up. All of these issues connected with water and that all these contaminants that are coming about are huge. And the other thing with water is that there's a lot of places along the coast of any continent, okay, they're pumping water out, and that's giving rise to saline water coming in. So salt has got a big conductor. Remember, salt water is a huge conductor. So electromagnetics has a huge role to play in these. Geothermal energy, you want to try to find hot water and structure at depth. Electrical conductivity is a role. Geotechnical problems, trying to figure out what the slope stability is and if you can do something with understanding structure. Hydrocarbons, again, electrical conductivity has a huge role, and in things like environmental contaminants understood. So the bottom line in this is that the potential applicability of electromagnetics is very, very large. It's just now over the last, maybe 5 to 10 years, really starting to reach that level of applicability, which has taken a long time because the EM problem is harder to solve. It's not like the magnetics problem, or it's not like the DC resistivity problems. EM problems, you have full Maxwell's equations, and it takes up computing power to do things. But we can now do that. We can now simulate data and convert them. So that means that potential applications. So, who here has had personal experience with something that they call an electromagnetic experiment, or somehow been involved with electromagnetic data. Anybody? Yes.
I used to do like geophysical mineral exploration work.
Okay.
That kind of stuff.
Anybody else? Nobody? Sure? Anybody taken an airplane ride recently? What happens when you go to the airport and you got to go through security? Pardon me? There's a metal detector. Okay? So how many people, have found themselves in this next instance here? Okay? You got the cage, right? So you're walking through, and you got to take off all your metal, right? You got to take off your belts. Can't carry. If you certainly wouldn't be allowed to take a suitcase. So the idea, right? You wait. The long lady kind of finally says, "Okay, come through," right? And you follow her. You take a step through. You go into here, and then suddenly, beep, beep, beep. There's an alarm that goes off, and the next thing you know, you're coming out. You have to put your hands up, press, and you set the whole thing up. But how does all that work? Did you ever think about it? Yeah. That's it, right? So this is it. We've got on the outside here, we have a transmitter. So that's a current that's going around it. So there's some kind of a loop of wire there, and there's a current that is going around. Now, if I have a current, and you're all aware of this, right? So if I've got a wire that's set up like this, what happens to the magnetic field? Or is there a magnetic field from that wire? Yeah.
The right hand rule goes around.
Right. So you remember right from grade school someplace, you put your thumb in the direction that the current is going, right? And you watch this, your fingers go around. By the way, that's a curl operation. So when you put your fingers around like that, that's like curl. So there's a magnetic field that goes around this guy here that looks like this. Okay? So every current gives rise to a magnetic field. In fact, all magnetic fields come from currents. Remember, even we saw the magnetic field of the Earth, okay? Right, so magnetic field of the Earth kind of looks like a dipole, right? Well, where does that come from? The magnetic field, well, let me do one more thing here. So suppose I've got a current, I've got a wire that's going up like this, right? So now I've got a magnetic field. But now suppose I took this wire, suppose I took the wire and bent it into a circle. Okay, so now I've got a current that's going like this. Okay, so it's just going around in this circle. Well, what's the magnetic field like that? Well, the magnetic field, at any particular point, it's just like a wire, right? So it's going to be circling around like this, and here it's going to be circling around like this, right? So I've got currents that are all going to kind of be circular. At the end of the day, and I should plot it in a slightly different manner, edge on. So suppose, kind of looking at, here's my loop of current, okay, going around like this. Each part of this has got magnetic fields that sort of go around like this, right? And at the end of the day, a loop of current like this actually has a magnetic field that looks like that. So a loop of current gives rise to a magnetic field that actually looks like a dipole. So that's how all this stuff fits together with the Earth. All magnetic fields come from currents. The Earth has a big magnetic field. Where does that come from? Well, we have this inner core, right? And we have these currents that are going through that gives rise to magnetic fields. Okay, so that's the first part. We've got a current that's going in here, and that's going to give rise to a magnetic field that goes outwards like that. So it's just going to be like a big magnetic dipole. That's it. Okay, that's the first part. The next thing is, this current is actually not going to be a constant current, not like DC resistivity. It's actually going to be a sinusoidal current. So that current, is actually going to look like this. It's going to be like some I naught cosine omega t. So this is time along this axis. This is time. So that means, so if my current is changing, then my magnetic field is changing. So that's a big deal, right? So if Samantha now she's a conductor, okay? And if I have a time-varying magnetic field on her, that's actually going to generate in her currents that are going on. So this is the principle of electromagnetic induction, that a time-varying magnetic field will actually generate a current. So that's what's happening in here. Time-varying magnetic field, see something metal in here, so it's going to generate currents. Now those currents, just like those back here, anytime I get a current, gives rise to a magnetic field. So those magnetic fields could be measured by this sensor. Okay, so that's the issue. So that's what's happening. Next time you go into one of these security things, you can think on one side of you is a transmitter giving up time-varying magnetic field. And if I happen to have anything that's metallic on here, it's going to generate a current. And any current is going to provide a magnetic field to be generated, measured by sensor. So that's a security scan. Anybody ever use this guy? Metal detector? Yeah. Find anything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ultimate ground.
Yeah, okay.
I found an urine once.
Ooh, good.
We were looking for it.
Oh, so this was like a real geophysical experiment. Whoa, I'm impressed. Okay. Actually, I think it's kind of a Zen thing. You go down to the you're down to the beach sometime. There's generally somebody there that's just. I think it's kind of really relaxing. So what's happening in here is that when you first of all get this current that's going around here, it gives the magnetic field that's going down. Time-varying magnetic field gives rise to currents, and those currents give rise to magnetic fields that are measured up by sensor. Same process. So this works at a small scale, works at big scales. It's one set of physics that just kind of has all applications at different kinds of scales. You're going to see a lot of pictures of this. This sort of our cartoon images to do it. So Soggy was with me. We went to various places around the world. We gave this short course about electromagnetic induction, and we really liked this particular image because we had done a lot of work. My group had done a lot of work for a kimberlite deposit in the Northwest Territories. It's a place called Tli-Kwai-Chum. And there's a couple of kimberlite deposits there, and they kind of look a bit like this, and that sort of became our. So here's the basic experiment. There's a setup. So we need a transmitter and a receiver. They're going to be towed in this bird. So the transmitter is T, so that's receiver is R. And we get this primary magnetic field that's given up. So the transmitter, just the same as I had here, the transmitter has got, like it's just a loop of wire, and so that gives rise to a magnetic field that looks like a dipole. So that's what's happening here. We got a transmitter, and so it's got current, and these are the magnetic field lines. And you see some of those magnetic field lines are impinging on this point. If I change that current so that I've got the time varying magnetic flux, so the time varying is really important, then it generates an electric field everywhere in here. So I glossed over that before because I didn't want to do too many new things at one time. But the idea is as follows. If I've got some kind of a conductor in here, and I've got a magnetic field, so B, but it changes in time so that there's a change of this magnetic field with time, then that gives rise to an electric field that I'm going to measure here. So now I get an electric field, or I can keep, I guess we'd already written in capitals, I'll keep capitals. So we get rise to an electric field, right? And now we can use Ohm's law. So I've got an electric field. We use Ohm's law that J is equal to sigma E, where sigma is the conductivity, E is that electric field, and J is current.
Do you tow the transmitter and the receiver in a helicopter so it won't produce enough electromagnetic field like use? Like, why aren't you towing it in a truck? Why in a helicopter?
Oh, airborne EM has many advantages in lots of problems, especially if you want to cover lots of area, and you can have, just the same as magnetic data, right? You could do it on the ground, or you could do it in the air. If you have an airborne survey, you can cover huge amounts. You don't have to worry about trees. So actually, one of the big advances over the last decade has been in the use of these airborne systems. And some of them are like this, they're towed in a bird, but others have got a great big loop underneath. So you'll see situations like this, where this is supposed to be a plane. All right, whatever. So, art's not one of my strong points. Okay, but you've got, it's actually, this is supposed to be a loop, a wire. It's actually, or horizontal, like this. So you got this loop of wire. This might be like 20 odd meters in diameter. So it's a big loop, and it's got a serious amount of current that's going through there. So that gives rise to a big magnetic field, and that's enough to get down into. So there's airborne systems that look like this. You see a lot of those these days. And then there's also systems that look like that. And in here's the transmitter and the receiver might actually be in the center of the loop, or it might be on here, or it might be lots of configuration. And those currents, they generate magnetic fields, and they can be contained at those. So that's the, here's the slide for the airborne, right? I mean, suppose you've got regions that are a couple 100 kilometers on the side, or you got really rugged mountains, right? Or you got this shielding problem, or you just really need to get sort of some high resolution or something here. Airborne systems are really magnetic. So take a read of the GPG for electromagnetics, because we only have Monday to get through the basic material for your lab. Right? So we're under really tight time.